welcome everybody to this webinar on the body, the missing piece to belief transformation. It really is about the connection between reconnecting to your body, healing from trauma, and transforming our beliefs. So I have a formula here that's called 3 quick wins, which is kind of 3 messages, take-home points, and they're really about trauma. Although this is about transforming beliefs, there's a big connection between those stuck beliefs and the trauma and difficult events that we've had in our lives. Point number 1, most persistent, recurrent, stuck traumas are due to unresolved, difficult, adversity, or even traumatic events. Not all of them, most of them are. Point number 2, this comes from a lot of the trauma research and the body psychotherapy research. So at the start of this, I want to give credit where credit is due. These are not my ideas. They come from researchers like Peter Levine, Bessel van der Kolk, Robert Scare, Pat Ogden, and a lot of these people that are really cutting edge here with neuroscience and how the nervous system, the body, and trauma and all these things work together. Trauma is not an event per se, but it happens because of incomplete, instinctive fight or flight responses that are never allowed to occur during a traumatic event or a difficult event. Take-home message number 3 is how we work with trauma in the first place. The language of trauma, so to speak, isn't English or Spanish or spoken words. It's not logic. It's not reason. It's sensation and movement. And this is tied directly to the fight or flight response. Now let's talk a little bit about how beliefs form. What this webinar is really about are those beliefs that just seem to be deeply rooted. The beliefs that are easy to transform, easy to change, things that we have aha moments, or there's education, we're like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Those aren't really the beliefs that we're talking about here. These are the beliefs that we've been working on. Maybe you've worked on them for years, you've released them, you've done cognitive therapy, you've cleared them, you've done mantras or whatever, and they're still there. That's what we're talking about here. So our beliefs, they form when we're young. They're either taught to us directly or indirectly. I say sometimes that they're in the air that we breathe because we just pick them up from the people in our environment, our teachers, our parents, the things we watch on TV, things we listen to. Sometimes these beliefs arise from our experiences, and either they're new beliefs because I didn't used to think that way, this happened, and now I do. There's a clear line of I've never been quite the same since. Or they're just kind of reinforcing the old beliefs that we already had, beliefs that we just grew up with, and they were cemented in because of events in our lives. We can also inherit our beliefs. Epigenetics is a real thing. We're not really going to get to that in here, but I just wanted to note that that is something that is real. Regardless of where these beliefs come from, we can work on them with the body-based mindfulness approach that I will talk to you about here at the end. How beliefs get stuck. Experiences in our lives can generate these new beliefs or cement the beliefs that we already have. The more intense, the more emotional, the more the fight or flight response is involved, the more the fear is there, the more those beliefs are going to be anchored to our bodies, to our nervous systems, to the experiences that we've had. They're not just in our mind. A lot of times the belief work that people try is based on the idea that our mind's a computer and our beliefs are like the programs. And that's an accurate model, but it's really more accurate to say our bodies are the computer. It's not just this nebulous mind concept or our brain. Experiences are stored throughout our body, throughout our nervous system, throughout our cells. And so it's not as easy as just like uploading a software update. I'm going to install a new belief and, okay, the patch has taken a hold. These beliefs reside in our bodies. Now, let's talk here a little definition about traumatic events. Big T traumas and little t traumas. And that's not my idea. It's just the way that they talk about trauma. Big T traumas, they're the ones that everybody would agree are traumatic. They're the real crisis events in our lives. Death of loved ones, abuse, neglect, combat. These are the ones that, they clearly affect us. It's the little T traumas that often go overlooked or unnoticed or underappreciated for the impact that they have on us. It can be anywhere from being ridiculed at school, to being bullied, to little personal events in our lives that we know impacted us, but other people don't know about it, right? It wasn't big enough to bring to the attention of everybody, but they accumulate over the years. I remember, for me, there was an example in first grade where I was just standing in line, people were jostling around, and a teacher just grabs me and pulls me out and shoves me in the corner in a weird classroom, totally shaming and embarrassing. And I was kind of a sensitive kid anyways. And that stuck with me for 40 years until I actually got to do this body-centered work. The shame of that event was alive 35 years later. It's crazy how this works, right? But if you've had these things, and I think most of us have, you know exactly what I'm talking about. Those experiences, they feel like they happened yesterday. They could have happened 30 years ago, right? These are the experiences that bind our beliefs to our nervous system. Now let's talk about the 3 parts of our brain. First part is the primitive brain, sometimes called the reptile brain, other times called the lizard brain. It's, among other things, what controls our fight, flight, and freeze responses. It governs a lot of the autonomic nervous system. We don't control this. And a lot of people spend a lot of energy trying to control these things that they can't control. Second part of the brain is the limbic system, sometimes called the mammalian brain. It regulates our emotions. And the third part, the newest part, the neocortex, has to do with language, reasoning, and logic. Why am I talking about these 3 parts of the brain? Well, it's really important to understand that these 3 parts of the brains all talk to each other. They're not separate, they're not individual. And the primitive brain really is the one that runs the show. It's not our thinking cognitive brain, because most of these higher order brain processes get hijacked when there's a fight or flight response. When we're threatened and there's danger, our survival instincts take over. And again, to reiterate what we talked about before, sensation and movement, those are the languages of the primitive brain. And that'll come into play here when we get into, well, what do we do about these things? Okay, more about the fight or flight response. It's important to understand the power of the fight or flight response. They're instinctive, they're commands, and these instinctive processes produce massive amounts of energy that our body is going to use to protect ourselves. It literally sends commands to our arms, our legs, our hands, feet to do something, to run, to fight, to duck, to protect my head, whatever it is. And so if these commands can be completed, feedback goes all the way down to my limbs and my body and comes back up to my brain, and essentially can tell my survival brain, it can turn off the red alert. And in the process, all this massive amounts of energy, they can be discharged. If these commands to my body are not completed, the feedback never gets to my brain that says, okay, done. And so the red alert doesn't go off. And the instinctive self-protection and all that energy that was generated so that I could do that is still alive in my nervous system. And this, accumulating over many, many, many experiences, can cause a variety of symptoms. So a couple examples I like to use. I've worked with the military for years, and so the idea of a commander giving an order and it trickles down to the troops that go out and fulfill that order. And when they're done, they return, where they report, filters back up to the commander. You check it off his list, mission accomplished. There's also kind of a fire alarm analogy here. So, think of school, think of being out in the schoolyard and going out for the fire drill, the lights are going off, and the sound's going off. Then when it's all clear, they turn it off. You go back in, you go about your day. But what would it be like if nobody ever turned off the fire alarm? It's over, right? There really isn't a fire, but the lights are still going and the sound's still blaring. I mean, you could probably sort of kind of tune it out a little bit, but it would be disruptive. And our brain's kind of like that too, right? If we don't get the feedback that says, hey, it's all clear now, you can turn off the fire alarm, then this fight or flight reactions that, they're still going on. They're still alive in my nervous system. We can kind of tune it out, sort of, but it's distracting. All right. So we learned a lot about how a nervous system discharges all of this charged up energy by observing animals in the wild. Animals in the wild instinctively discharge their fight or flight energy. If they survive an attack, they run, they get out of there. At the end of the run, they may tremble or shake or whatever to discharge the last of that energy, and then they go about their day, eating grass or whatever they need to do. The excess energy is discharged by some sort of movement. So again, the movement here is key to the body knowing how to let go of some of the energy. With us as people, the same thing is true. We have a built-in capacity to discharge from trauma. The catch is we've also got a thinking brain. And by the time we're really young, these instinctive responses, they're socialized away from us. I can remember being in kindergarten, being really nervous to go there, but I'm not running out screaming and running like I actually wanted to. Those of us that are a little more cautious, we can learn from those kids that maybe didn't actually learn at a young age. They got in trouble or they acted out. And boy, man, I don't want that to happen to me. So that even reinforces my ability to override my instinct. And again, that happens when we're young, 5 or 6 years old, maybe even younger. Now, example of this. So I have a daughter now who's a teenager, but when she was young, probably 2 years old, we had a neighbor that got a new puppy. I think it was a lab puppy. And run over there and jump on the kids. And she loved this dog. But she was kind of a sensitive nervous system kind of girl. And so when the dog came really close or got on her lap, she would hold it, but her body would shake at the same time. And it was really interesting to see her have this fun experience and her body was shaking. Now, it wasn't like a convulsion, and it wasn't like she was terrified, but her body was nevertheless letting go automatically of this excess energy. In a sense, her fight or flight response was kicking in there. Her sympathetic nervous system was at least online going, oh, ooh, is this a threat? Really? It wasn't like a huge threat, but it was enough that her body automatically was letting go of this extra energy. Then the dog would run away and go, chase some other kids, then come bounding on back, jump on her lap, and boom, there she would go again, having a great time, but kind of shaking at the same time. And the dog would walk away, and about 10 seconds later, shaking would just go away. And I had just been starting to learn some of this stuff. And so again, it was fascinating to observe what was going on in her body. We have this built into us. But again, if we don't allow that to happen, the unfinished energy that's stored in our body causes symptoms. It remains in the body. And it's really important, this whole connection between trauma, the body, and beliefs is the fact that our body is the actual storage container for all this excess energy. It's got to go somewhere, and it goes into our cells, into our muscles, into our connective tissues, into all the different areas that make up our body. It actually requires extra energy from us to suppress this unfinished energy. And so we can get really tired and fatigued, and it just siphons away a lot of the vitality if there's a lot of this unfinished fight or flight energy. In more extreme cases, this is what we're talking about with PTSD or an anxiety disorder. The PTSD, that kind of the definition, really, if you think about it from a nervous system point of view, is that the body is reacting as if there's still a threat right now in the moment in my environment, although really the threat was in the past and it's gone. But because I have all of these commands to my body, run, fight, duck, hide, and they were never finished, my brain never got the word, hey, it's okay. So anytime I get triggered, right, by something in my environment that brings me back to the same body state that I was in, my brain goes, oh, I recognize that. I recognize that as this unfinished stuff. It's danger. Okay. In less severe cases, the symptoms may not reach the level of PTSD, but chronic anxiety is a common situation. I dealt with that for the first 40 plus years of my life, not ever understanding quite why, not ever understanding why nothing I tried really seemed to truly get to the bottom of it. Things helped. Everything I tried helped a little bit, but there were still answers I was looking for until I came across the stuff that really included the body. This top-down versus bottom-up approach, it's a different way of understanding how I can work with the body and beliefs. The top-down approach to changing my beliefs, for example, is when with my cognitive brain, I recognize that I'm believing something that isn't true, or it's limiting, or it's irrational. And I decide, you know what, I don't want this in my life. I want to change this. So I use strategies. I use cognitive therapy, affirmations, mantras, thought stopping, cognitive restructuring. There's a whole slew of things that I can use. Sometimes I use it with music, and I envision what I want to have happen and how I want to believe, so I can access maybe the limbic system as well. But if I'm not working with the body and the nervous system, these techniques only can take me so far. I know once I read that, the average person might have 50,000 different thoughts in a day. How am I going to keep track of all those? How can I stop all those thoughts and then put in competing thoughts or rational thoughts? It's an exhausting tactic. And so the bottom-up approach is the idea that it's really not my cognitive brain that's causing my problems, but the physiological state of my nervous system. When my nervous system enters into a state of triggered fight or flight, it trickles up in my cognitive brain, trying to make sense of what's going on in my world, both external and internal, goes, okay, well, I'm feeling fear. There must be something dangerous around here. So I'm looking around in the crowds, I'm looking around in, all these places where it feels like it's threatening. So there must be something out there. It's driven by my physiology, instead of the idea that the top-down approach says, well, I've got this belief deep down inside that crowds are dangerous. So if I can just fix that belief, or if I can fix the belief that, opening up to a friend isn't too dangerous, then I can do it. It's the working with my body first instead of working with my belief first. And really, both top-down and bottom-up approaches are important. So I can't just do one without the other, or I'm missing a big piece of belief transformation. Body-based mindfulness. Now, this is the approach that I've taken. It's a way of utilizing what I've learned from body psychotherapy and applying it to how do I transform and change my beliefs. It's a really straightforward and gentle approach to resolving the traumatic stuff that keeps my beliefs in place in order to transform these deeply rooted core beliefs. And although I'm not going to cover it all here in this webinar, just an overview of it, it works with our sensations to gradually expand my capacity to tolerate living in my body. Most of the time, for the first 40 years of my life, at least, I was living from the top of my head to the bottom of my chin. I was all intellectual, cognitive in my head. I didn't want to live in my body. I felt like my body really was my own worst enemy. It was so tense, so tight. I had so much social anxiety and just anxiety in general, worry, that it was so unpleasant. I I just wanted all that to go away. And realizing after a while that I missed and not even understood that I needed to work with my body and my nervous system. I got it intellectually, but it took me time. I had to practice. My container, so to speak, was about the size of a thimble. It's like I couldn't tolerate very much until I was wanting to check out. So it took practice and practice and practice. Just being mindful of what was going on in my body, being able to sit with it. But gradually, as I did that, I was able to tolerate more and more. Titration, this word down here at the bottom, is where we slow things down to take the smallest steps that we need to in order to not re-traumatize and re-trigger the body. Especially anybody that's gone through some really significant trauma, it could be difficult to sit with my body for 30 seconds. It's just hard. So how is body-based mindfulness a different approach to beliefs transformation? Well, it's really, like I said before, based on the cutting edge trauma research, again, utilizing sensations, tolerating them, following these in my body, tapping into the body's rhythm of being able to let go of the charge that I've carried around for such a long time and bringing balance back to the nervous system. In a lot of ways, it's counterintuitive. Like mindfulness is sometimes counterintuitive, or acceptance is counterintuitive. It's natural to not want to feel the uncomfortable, painful sensations that live in my body. The desire to want things to just go away, well, that's kind of everybody's, at least entry point into the healing journey, right? We want to feel better. It's really about acknowledging and accepting and allowing things to happen in my body, as opposed to deciding I'm going to change something, putting forth lots of effort, trying to force myself to believe things that I know are true. Body-based mindfulness is more rooted in trusting the wisdom of the body, that it knows how to heal. Not just physical cuts or anything like that, but it really knows how to let go of emotional baggage. So it's trusting in the wisdom versus trying to control and fix and stop and intellectualize. So appreciate everybody watching this. Hopefully it was thought-provoking, maybe stimulated some ideas for you. If you want to learn more, please, I encourage you to visit us at bodybasedmindfulnesscourses.com and also at 1000beliefs.com. They're both related, and they're great methods to really bring it all together. The body, difficult events in our lives, and beliefs, how they all work together, and how we can find a gentle, straightforward approach to really get to the bottom of those things and start the belief transformation that we're looking for. Again, thank you so much for watching.